You are the most demoralized, brain-rotted idiot alive.
All right, everybody. This is the final segment from the Elika LeBlon, Piers Morgan, Dave Smith debate. This last section transitions away from the strictly like Israel-Palestine bombardment genocide situation to the Iran, pseudo war, 12-day war thing that happened. Piers Morgan actually flips sides and starts backing up Elika on this point, and just like sort of the neocon establishment side of things. So we sort of have Dave Smith going one versus two on this one, and he handles himself pretty well. As usual, please like and subscribe to the channel. Leave some comments below. Have some thoughtful discussion, please. And without further ado, here is the final segment of the implosion of Elika LeBlon.
Let's just pivot. Hang on a sec. I want to pivot to Iran because, Dave, you on 22nd of June, and I've obviously talked to you on the show as well around this period, you posted on X, Donald Trump's now launched an illegal war of aggression against Iran. The risk of an absolute catastrophe is very high and the benefits are non-existent. Worst of all, he did it on behalf of a foreign government against a country who posed no threat to us. Now, as things stand, it looks increasingly like Trump brought all this to an end with targeting 3 nuclear strikes with the B-2 bunker buster bombs. We don't know the scale of the damage, but even the Iranians are saying significant. And the war appears to be now at a ceasefire stage after 12 days, which is being kept and held, which I'm astonished by. Trump has no desire, he's made it clear, to put any boots on the ground or to affect any America-driven regime change. I think he was misinterpreted when he first talked about that. I think he meant an organic regime change possibly happening a la Syria in December, but we don't know. But that was my take on what he said. But he certainly clarified that now as he doesn't want Americans to force it. What is actually wrong with what has happened and unfurled here? I mean, given what the Atomic Agency report made clear, that the Iranians have been enriching uranium from a safe civilian usage of 3.5–4% to 60% in rapid time, and they were hiding.
Before I let Dave Smith is going to go and basically say the whole thing, but this is just a great example of how Piers can, like, the first 2/3 of this segment, Piers was ostensibly on the right side of things, 95%. Now he just takes a complete turn into like what the fucksville, and his whole framing is completely disturbed and wrong. So I'll let Dave Smith go ahead and finish the job.
Information, they were obfuscating, they weren't allowing proper, full, transparent inspections and so on. Is there really anything ideological on putting aside Gaza, putting aside everything else, purely on the apparently imminent threat? By imminent, I mean in the next few months, that the Iranians would have had an ability to weaponize their uranium quite quickly to 90% and potentially create up to 10 nuclear bombs, having assured the world they wouldn't do that. They are supporting and promoting every terror group going from Hezbollah to the Houthis to Hamas to destroy Israel. If you're Israel, why would you not preemptively strike? And if you're the United States and you've got the leaders of the Iranian regime saying death to America and encouraging that chant, why would you also not want to neutralize the nuclear sites?
Well, let me start by saying that I really am just absolutely thrilled that, number one, that the Iranians gave that warning and that their response was kind of like one of those Iranian responses where we want to seem tough, but we sure do want to make sure we don't kill any Americans that could get us destroyed. And I'm thrilled that Donald Trump took that off-ramp and immediately started pushing a ceasefire. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but thank God that he did that, because, and I think all sane people around the world should be thankful that he took that off-ramp and this didn't lead to a catastrophe. But no, I mean, I think that I think essentially your question is all flawed. I mean, even in the IAEA report that you're referring to, they also reiterated that Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb and that they have not made the decision to start pursuing one. And so there was no imminent threat. Listen, even Benjamin Netanyahu, in his interview with Brett Baer, who always, Piers, as you know, has a long history of just making up how long the Iranians are to developing a nuke, even he said maybe a year, 13 months. But the point is that in order for them to do that, they would have had to kick the inspectors out. And then it would have taken them at least a matter of years to develop a nuclear bomb if they had made the political decision to start seeking one, and then it would have taken them a while to figure out.
Do you think they should have one?
My point.
Do you think Iran should have a nuclear bomb?
Again, so stupid. Such a, like, I don't know if maybe he had producers in his ear trying to like catch a moment or something, but Yeah, of course nobody wants anybody to have a nuclear bomb. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's so stupid.
No, I don't think anybody should have nuclear
Right,
weapons. So I
but do
certainly
you think
don't
in
think Iran should
particular
have.
Iran should have one, given how much it supports terrorist groups?
Well, I will answer that question. Let me just say the point I was making there is just that there was no imminent threat. We had more than enough time to do what the American legal system requires in this situation, which is that you bring it to Congress so that the people theoretically can have a debate through their representatives.
But actually,
and a declaration
as you know,
of war
David,
can be
I mean, I
launched.
saw AOC making that argument, and I replied to her, almost every military strike ordered by an American president this century has been done without prior congressional approval.
Yeah, but what type of argument is that, Pierce? Every war since World War II has been fought undeclared. That doesn't mean it's the proper.
But the
legal,
argument is that
system.
if you go for congressional approval, inevitably it will leak out, and you lose the element of surprise.
Yeah, okay, but then the argument also is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the founders very intentionally placed war-making power in the.
And can somebody, and I don't know, maybe my British audience can help. Is this like a common Brit like thought process? Like is peer like this feeling that like maybe that goes back to the days of having kings? And I know you guys still have a king, but you guys have parliament. And king is really like symbolic at this point. I don't really know how it works, but is there like a yearning still for this like extra like this like war declaring power, like all encompassing executive king that can just do whatever he wants? Like is that like a common thing that like because this is very very un-American talking from my perspective, but you guys let me know.
The Congress because they didn't want it to be, they didn't want the president to have the war-making powers of a king. Now,
yeah, but
listen,
it does. Commander-in-chief can make military strikes as well. It just can't declare war.
Yeah, well, there's some debate about that amongst constitutional scholars, but yes, but that refers to like an imminent threat, which by all accounts this wasn't. Now, listen, I don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. I think that everything that U.S. but basically all of U.S. and Israeli foreign policy seems to have been geared around incentivizing them to make one for about as long as I've been alive, which I think is very counterproductive. But I will say that I think there is a couple thoughts here that I think people should really consider. And number one, that I don't, I still think that Donald Trump, as great as it is that he walked us back from this, I think it was totally reckless and wrong for him to launch it to begin with. But think about this. The whole foundational claim for the Hawks' justification about Iran getting a nuke here, because obviously lots of really, really bad people have had nuclear weapons in the history of the world, and that's not a good thing. But like Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong and like, today, current Vladimir Putin, China, I mean, there's lots of really bad regimes that have nuclear weapons. It's almost never been on the table among serious people that we ought to launch a war of aggression and choice because a regime. But the claim here is that Iran is so crazy. There are these religious fundamentalists, and self-preservation simply isn't a motivating factor for them, and therefore they can't be allowed to get it.
You wouldn't dispute that it.
And they're going to cut him off and he won't be able to finish his point, but I know exactly what he's going to say. He's going to say, if self-preservation isn't a priority for Iran, then why did they just do the faux like military strikes on the US base where they let them know ahead of time, hey, we're going to do this, so don't strike us back and annihilate us because we actually want to preserve ourselves here. So that's the argument he's going to make. So the whole counter argument to that falls apart because we know and we've seen in the way Iran has acted recently, they in fact do care about self-preservation. They're not some suicidal maniac like out of its mind state. So that was the point he's going to make before he gets cut off here.
But Dave, hang on. You wouldn't dispute though the central argument that Israel has about it, which is that Iran has been the main sponsor for Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah for a number of years, all of whom are terror groups wedded to eliminating Israel. You wouldn't dispute that.
I don't dispute that they have supported those groups, and I don't dispute that that's the Israeli
isn't that
claim.
right there, the existential threat to Israel?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but Israel, listen, if Israel is the only country in the Middle East who secretly has nuclear weapons and is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they also funded Hamas. So I'm sorry, I do not think it's a legitimate justification for them to launch a war because they claim someone else is making nukes when they're not, and also they also funded Hamas or something like that. So no.
respond to this now? Can I respond to this
Yes.
now? First of all, this claim that there's no evidence that the regime is making nukes is totally false. It's totally false. We know that they've enriched to 60%, which means they're 90% of the way there. There's no reason to have anything above 3 to 5% for civilian use. Everybody understands that 60%, the only purpose of it is for nuclear weapons. Now, for a long time, the US and the Western world have been trying to delay the breakout time. That was the whole point of the JCPOA and all of these other deals, was that we know that they're months away, right? That's why you keep saying, oh, they've been months away for years, right? But they've been trying to extend the breakout time from months away to at least a year away for the past 10 to 15 years. So actually, everybody is fully aware that the regime has always been months away from developing nuclear weapons. Now, second of all, again, it's making these moral equivalencies between the United States or different countries or Israel or whoever having nuclear capabilities. What you're talking about here is a regime whose fundamental motto, its entire basis of existence, is death to Israel and death to the United States. That is what it stands for. That is what its leaders chant on a daily basis. That is what school children have to chant in the playground before they start school every day. Death to America, death to Israel. Every day, their strategy is, how do we destroy the United States and how do we destroy Israel? Now, when you have an expansionist ideology that has eschatological beliefs about the end of the world and the end of Israel, and the desire is to proliferate and export its ideology of velayat faqih, not just to the Middle East, but to the entire world, and you say, I don't understand what's the difference between them having nukes and others having nukes, that is just profoundly misguided. Second of all, I
didn't say that.
Second of all, this isn't just about the threat of the nukes themselves. I don't think anyone's thinking to themselves that that the Islamic Republic's just going to drop a nuke as soon as it has one. The whole point of it reaching nuclear capabilities is that it becomes a deterrent state. Once it becomes a deterrent state, how are you going to deter its bad behaviors? How are you going to prevent its alliances with its regional proxies? How are you going to prevent more October 7th when everything you try to do to sanction them and contain them is met with, what are you going to do? We've got nukes. And it also prevents the containment of the region, because now UAE, Egypt, all of these other countries are so under threat that they also have to develop nuclear capabilities. So it is actually allowing them to get that far. That would be the cause of regional and global instability. So it's just preposterous to say that we should have just done nothing about that or got into another deal that just kicked the can down the road again. We are in the position that we are in because nobody contained this for as many decades as it's been a growing threat. We've passed the Neville Chamberlain moment.
Okay.
Totally. It's just total bullshit. I mean, just listen, the reason why now this 60% enrichment, which obviously for anyone paying attention there is another reason besides they were developing a nuclear weapon, which again, all of the intelligence says they had not even made the political decision that they wanted to develop a nuclear weapon yet, let alone weren't doing it. It was a chip to bargain away, which is actually what they were trying to do. They were in the middle of negotiations when Israel snuck attacked them and launched
that means you concede. Hang on. That means you concede that what they were doing was creating the impression that they were going to build a nuclear bomb.
Listen, there's no question that they upped the enrichment. But listen, here's the point. They weren't allowed to, under the JCPOA. Under the JCPOA, when America was involved, they weren't allowed to enrich to this level, but they were allowed to do it if America pulled out. That's in the JCPOA agreement. And so when Donald Trump tore that up, and walked away, they brought their enrichment up. What were the negotiations, Piers, that were happening right before Israel launched their surprise attack? It was for Iran to bring the enrichment back down and America to get back in some type of agreement. They weren't going to call it the JCPOA because Donald Trump would have had to make it his own thing and not getting back into Obama's.
Trump gave them 60 days to negotiate. Trump said he got 60 days, and day 61, Israel attacked.
Right. Okay. Now, but what happened, and this was widely reported, and Donald Trump himself acknowledged this, is that the hawks insisted that you put a poison pill in the negotiations. This is what Mark Levin was freaking out about, and that the standard has to be that Iran must give up all nuclear enrichment altogether. This was always a poison pill, so that the point is that Iran was willing to negotiate, and so if you really wanted to get back into that deal, Donald Trump honestly just never should have torn up the JCPOA, and we'd all be in a much better situation. It ushered in a new inspection regime, and so we know this is why we know that they're enriching up to 60%, because they're still in the agreement and they still have the inspections, unlike Israel.
Let me ask you this. I'm sure since you know about the JCPOA, I'm sure you know that it was replete with sunset provisions for up to 10 to 15 years, where all of those containment would be expired, and they would have more than $150 billion to continue developing their missiles and nuclear programs. The JCPOA was never a solution. Not only that, but not only did they inherit more than $100 billion, they were also able to expand their regional terror. And Khamenei repeatedly came on television and said, we are going to use that money to fund our allies. So there was actually a backdoor to the JCPOA where the regime, the Islamic Republic, was able to expand its regional influence and fund its allies, which eventually led to October 7th, which eventually brought us to where we are now. So yes, the JCPOA did intend to temporarily constrain their nuclear ability.
I have to jump in because what they always leave out of the situation is again, it's always one side. It's always that Israel is always the victim, right? But when we know the reality of the situation is Israel and the United States have been fucking with these countries for decades, and a lot of the response or a lot of the inception of all of these groups, your Hezbollahs, your Hamas, your Houthis, etc. Are almost always in response to like Israel fucking around in Lebanon or in Syria or doing, ungodly things in Gaza or any number of things. So the Iranian response in supporting these things, which again, I don't support any of it or any of the violence or any of the idolatry or the zealotry or any of this nonsense on both sides, that leads to violence and that leads to these horrible acts. But that the Iranian response or the pushback in a lot of cases is just because of Western fuckery and Israeli fuckery. So again, there's always two sides to the story. She's not presenting it, of course, because it doesn't suit her to do so. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we are understanding. I know most of us are, but anyway.
But it was always understood that by the time it expired, they would be $150 billion richer. Their proxies would be fortified. They would have been responsible for significant regional destabilization, and then they would be able to enrich if they wanted to. And the only way to prevent that was to get into another nuclear deal, which would require unfreezing hundreds and billions of more. So they would just keep getting enriched, rich and empowered. So the question is, how does this end? Just a lifetime of JCPOAs?
Well, let me ask a question just to end this because we've run out of time. Dave, hang on. Let me put a question to Dave, which is that if it turns out that all this activity in the last 2 weeks drives Iran to the negotiating table, they do agree to give up a lot of their enriched uranium and so on, reduce it back to civilian levels and so on, and there is a period of sustained peace in the region, and the Gaza hell is brought to an end as well. And in 6 months' time, all this is over. Should Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize? Because Barack Obama got one 8 months into his tenure for basically just doing a bit of fancy chat about world peace.
Well, I guess grading on the Obama curve, everybody deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, literally, the three of us are much better candidates than Barack Obama was. So judging on that curve. No, look, I mean, I think that would be great if that's the result of all of this. I think that what Donald Trump's policy was so reckless and it had such a risk. And this is what I was trying to get at before that I hope people appreciate. Look, if Iran had not made the calculation to give advanced warning and had just fired off missiles the way they did into Israel. But this is the whole point, Piers.
I think Trump called their bluff. I think Trump called their bluff because he realized that what Israel had done over a period of days is expose the Iranian regime as having a military that was a dud.
Piers,
couldn't even deal with what Israel was flying.
They don't want to be destroyed. They would rather rule than be destroyed.
Exactly.
But the point is that we put this in the hands of the Iranian government. If they hadn't done that, we may have had to launch a full regime. What would Donald Trump have done if 50 or 100 Americans had been killed in an Iranian attack?
Well, thankfully, that has not.
We risked a catastrophe.
Thankfully, that hasn't happened because Iran was so panicky. They actually gave prior warnings to everybody to make sure it didn't happen.
So maybe they're not such a scary threat after all.
Well, that's an interesting point if you take away their nuclear weapons. Alika, final word to you, very quickly.
Yes. Okay. Your whole point, this whole conversation and everything that you've been saying online is that Israel is engaging in terrorism, ethnic cleansing, all of these things that you claim to be against. And yet you are so happy to engage in these deals that enrich the Islamic Republic and its machinery of oppression to hang and lynch and torture women. So if you're so against what Israel is doing, if you're so against funding what Israel is doing, why are you so happy to fund this regime in its domestic and regional terror by the same means of empowering them with money through the diplomatic?
I know, it's crazy. It's almost like I'm opposing war across the board.
You're opposing war by actually supporting
wars. Why would that be?
So you're opposing war, like by first of all instigating more war down the road. Okay, that's the Neville Chamberlain moment.
Just asserting that it's nonsense.
Second of all, you are
nonsense.
A prediction of the future is not a fact. Please.
You are happy for Iranians to be slaughtered, raped, killed, and hanged, so long as in your fantasy world you're opposing war, but you're not okay with it in Gaza. But you're not okay with it in Gaza. You're an idiot.
Maybe you got a friend who's better.
Okay.
Everyone's better than your stupidity. You are the most demoralized, brain-rotted idiot alive. Thank you.
All right, take a deep breath.
Thank you both very much indeed. I appreciate it.
Wow, holy shit. I mean, Jesus Christ. Well, there you go. We made it all the way through, guys. We did it, part 3. I will be fair and admit that at least she had a little bit, in the, sort of the midway point there, at least there was a little more logic, on her, I don't want to even say on her side, but, some of her points were a little less hollow than in the first 2 segments. But Dave Smith holding his own and doing well, and it just goes to show you on the other side when you start your argument from the premise or from the basis that your whole frame is just so fucked up and wrong and stupid, as she would say, that it's really hard to just come through and sound reasonable. So. There you guys have it. Dave Smith and Erica LeBlon on Piers Morgan in this final segment on Iran specifically. And let me know what you guys think in the comments as usual. Drop a like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.